Good morning. So I wanted to do a quick follow-up with my chair, and I'm doing this with a smaller handheld camera so I can control lighting. Overall, I still really like the chair. These armrests that I thought would be a little stiff aren't really that bad. I mean, they do collapse a bit, but they give enough support, so it's kind of like the side of a car door on the inside where a lot of people rest their arms. It's not bad. What I don't really like is that these are just free floating, so they can just move around, so it takes me a while to kind of kick them back where I always like them. But again, minor annoyances. I don't really keep these up at all. I tend to keep them all the way down so that they slide under my desk a little easier, so minor annoyance. The length of the seat from the back to the front is really nice and long, and depending on how tall you are and where you position it, it's good to slide it forward if your knees are too far forward and you want the support of the front. Otherwise, if your legs are shorter, you can pull this back, and you can see it can go back a pretty good distance back there and create a good seating position for you. The cushion itself is not super thick. It's memory foam. It's got a little bit of a bolster on the side that curves up, but for the most part it's fairly flat and level. What I've noticed on it is that it does tend to feel like you're sitting in a chair for long periods of time as it pushes down, because it doesn't collapse or sink into it as much as my gaming chair did. But what I notice is that I don't have as much fatigue, and my butt doesn't get quite as sore from sitting on it for lengthy periods of time as a result. It kind of encourages you to shift your position a little bit, which makes it much more comfortable in the long run. So far I like it. I'm curious to see how well it will hold up. Now, adjustment-wise, I've fiddled around with it a bit. I've got my lumbar dialed in. You can see it's a little above the lowest setting, or you can see it's a little above the halfway part there. I've lowered it a couple of times and raised it up a little bit, trying to get it dialed in. I think this is pretty good because it's in my lower back pretty nicely right there, and it's very comfortable. You really don't notice it, but it does encourage you to scoot your butt back and sit in a more upright posture. Now, the chair itself I have leaned back just slightly, and I've locked it from rocking. I did initially allow it to rock back, which I thought was good, and it still is. I enjoy that because it has enough tension adjustment in there to where I could set it to not just collapse backwards as soon as I sat in the chair. It would stay fairly firm at the top, and if I pushed a little bit, I could get it to lean back fairly easily, and that was nice. But I found that it led to some back pain, so I've tried to keep it as taut as I can for now. But that is not a bad thing. The headrest is a bit of a different story. You can see I'm 6'1", and I've got this headrest pulled all the way up as far as it can. Now, the adjustment on this is basically you have a downward facing, clicks up, and that's all the way. I tend to try and keep mine there or about there, depending on how I'm sitting. If I'm sitting all the way up, my shoulders butt up right against that, and you'll see why in just a minute, or how I know that I'm hitting that in just a second. Now, it's not uncomfortable. If I angle it down, it does dig into my shoulders, which is why it just kind of pops back up. But this is really not the best adjustment system. It's got a bolt in here where I could probably tighten it. I easily have an Allen key that will fit in that, but I don't feel that this is the best method to do this, because it's either going to be too flimsy to stay in position when you rest your head on it, and the idea is that your head would go straight into the middle of this, so your head pushing into it wouldn't cause it to rotate if you're hitting it in the right position. So you can see I'm hitting it there and it's not going. If I hit it too low, then it rotates in and goes down. If I hit it too high, then it tends to try and push itself down. So if you're angled on it just right, then it's not going to go anywhere. But if you move around and knock this with your shoulders or anything, click, click, off it goes. So I don't think this is the best way to do it. I mean, maybe a little tab that unlocks it that you could reach with your hand or something. I don't know, but I will tighten this to keep it in place better, but I don't know, then I won't be able to pull it down if I'm slouched or leaning in a different position. Anyway, minor annoyance, not a major concern, but it's not bad. The back of this chair has very breathable fabric. Now, it's not that it's cold in cooler weather because it's breathing, but in my DX Racer and any gaming chair really, you'll notice that depending on what you're wearing, your back can kind of get a little warm and sweaty because there's no breathability to the back of that pleather, and it's going straight into a foam pad, so it just really feels heat into the backside of your body, and it has nowhere to go. Whereas this, there's a channel for it to breathe and move, so your back actually doesn't get too hot. It stays fairly comfortable and nice. The downside, though, is this material. And you can see what I mean here. As I angle this, you can see all these little nubs. This isn't the chair. This is little pieces of fleece off of my pullovers that I typically wear. And I can pick them all off. And if I can get it in the camera frame, you can see that it's just all these little hunks of fleece that have rolled off from my back as I slide up and down, or as I leaned back in the chair, the back of the chair would slide up my back a little bit and rub these off. You can see here where some of them have come from my shoulders and the neck portion of my clothing as well. So I think that's a bit of an annoyance. I like the material, it's sturdy. I don't think this backing is going to wear out anytime soon. But depending on your clothing, you may rub things a little raw on there. And because the little fleece pieces got stuck in the liner, now I'm stuck with this look all over the back of it. And after a while, you can see they start dropping off all over the floor, which is kind of a tacky look. It looks similar to the pleather bleeding off my chair as it wore out. The casters, I have no real complaints on. The chair is heavy, but it rolls fairly nicely. What I have noticed is that because these wheels are smaller and they're a little heavier, if I roll, let's just see if I can demonstrate it, if I roll off of the back and then try to turn around, what usually happens is this lip, if some of these others are pushing down farther in because it lifts that up, it will catch like that and get stuck. So if the chair is more in this type of a position and then I roll off of it, because these wheels are pushing down, you can see it lifts it off a little bit. I tend to catch the wheels. I only had that happen once or twice on my DX Racer, but in this one I do it almost daily in some portion when I roll off to the side or something, depending on how I roll back. I had some concerns in the video originally mentioning that this might get a little scuffed or dirty. You can see I've scuffed it a little bit with some shoes, but the powder coating on this is really nice. It's very sturdy, so resting your feet on there isn't going to be a problem, but it is slippery, so your shoes aren't going to grip it as much as it would on the DX Racer. Now the other alternate way of leaning back is this locking mechanism here. I keep this locked because I don't like the way it rotates the chair. So when you lean back with that lever down, it changes the back position, so this arm is able to articulate and it kind of pulls the top down, and the whole back position tends to slide up, making the chair seem taller than it really is, which versus just leaning back where it just articulates around the bottom, which is what you can see this part does. It will just rotate the back and kind of keep it in the same relative position to your back. This actually changes the shape of the chair, and for me, I don't like that in leaning back, but if you're trying to adjust the positioning of the back itself to gain a little more, it's not too bad. My shoulders tend to float up in about this area if I sit up all the way, so that the top of my shoulder's there, so the shoulder blades are in this free area, whereas on the DX Racer there was a bit of a padding there. Never was a problem on the DX Racer. It's not a problem in this one just because of where my shoulder blades fit. But if you're a little shorter and you want to get the back up out of your way so that the shoulder blades aren't sitting on this hard part here, then you can do that to get it out of the way without too much of an issue. Otherwise, if you're taller, then you may end up with problems hitting into the headrest, but that's a totally different story. So the positioning is really not that big of a deal, and it does work very well, so I'm kind of pleased with that. But the ability to come back in here and adjust the stiffness of the actual rotation is very nice. The DX Racer, I couldn't do that. This actually allows you to rock back and forth because you can tighten or weaken how much tension is on that spring, allowing you to stay seated pretty vertically without a lot of effort. But if you push a little bit, you can get the thing to collapse to a certain degree without having to put a lot of effort behind it. So if you want to be able to push into it for a moment to then kind of rock back forward, it works very well. And if you put your weight into it, you can lean it back depending on how you dial it in and what your preferences are, which I do really like. And it's very easy to simply reach down here and unlock the rotational mechanism to just start leaning back and then click it back into place. But I keep it at the first notch backwards. Other than that, I'm very pleased with the purchase. It's a very solid chair. I plan to use it for a long time, and I am very pleased with my purchase. A few minor concerns, tons of customization options, Do take your time to dial in any chair that you do get, simply to make sure that it's comfortable for you. Utilize your typical 30-day return policy to get that done. But hopefully you found this video helpful. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.